Okay, hello everyone. So my name is Sian Eager and I am the Theatres at Risk Advisor at Theatres Trust, and I also manage the Resilient Theatres Resilient Communities programme. I'd like to welcome you to today's webinar, which is about fundraising for capital projects for theatres. This webinar is being presented as part of our Resilient Theatres Resilient Communities programme. This is a new programme of work. It's a 3-year scheme and we're in the first year, and it's kindly being funded by the National Lottery Heritage Fund, the Pilgrim Trust and Swire Charitable Trust. This is the second webinar of a series that will be running under that programme, and we plan each year to run 3 webinars which are free and are open for everyone to attend. If you missed the first one, which was about understanding heritage projects, that is available to view on the Theatres Trust website. Our third webinar, just a little plug for that, will also be available, and we're planning that for the 18th of October on the theme of governance. So further information will be released about that on our social media and on our website, and through our newsletter. So please do sign up for those communications, and hope to see you at future events as well. So just some housekeeping notes that I need to go through for today's event. As I mentioned, this is a new scheme of work, and we would really appreciate your feedback to let us know how we're doing. After the session, you will receive an email which will provide you with a link to a survey. It would be really helpful if you could complete that for us, give us your feedback, as we'd like to know what you think, and it's very valuable for us. So as we've already mentioned, please could I ask you to turn off your video and keep yourself on mute, and do that throughout the session. That's just to ensure that we can hear our speakers clearly and without interruption, particularly as we have quite a large audience today. I would like to, as you know, we are recording the event, so just to confirm that an edited version of the video will be made available to attendees after the session. We hope to share that with you, hopefully by the end of next week. We will also be sharing the presentation slides. We have enabled the captioning function for the webinar. If you would like to make use of that facility, then please use the live transcript button, which you should see at the bottom of your screen. It has a CC symbol that's on your Zoom toolbar. As we have speakers today who are using slides and quite a large audience, the recommended setting for your view on Zoom is the speaker view, and if you use the side-by-side option, that should allow you to see both the slides and the pinned speaker and give the best view. If you do have any technical issues, please make use of the chat function and send your message to Theatres Trust host directly rather than sharing with everyone. My colleague Sophia is here to deal with technical issues, so she will do her best to assist you with any problems. Please do also type your comments and any questions you have in the chat box, which is being monitored by my colleague. We have around 20 to 30 minutes approximately at the end for audience questions, so would like to hear from you then, please. And if you're wishing to raise a question with a particular speaker, then please do indicate with, that in your comment. Okay, so before we turn to our speakers, I just want to quickly give you an outline of the structure of today's session, so you know what to expect. We have a great lineup of speakers for you today. So we're going to start with an overview of the funding landscape and getting fit for funding, which will be delivered by Theatre Trust's Development Director, Kate Bierman. We'll then hear from Asha Kabari, who is Director of Investments at the Architectural Heritage Fund. Asha will introduce the Architectural Heritage Fund's funding options and explain their loan process. Our next speaker will be David Hall, who is the Chief Executive of the Foyle Foundation. David will talk about the Foyle Foundation's priorities their grant programme for capital and revenue schemes, and what they look for in a successful application. Our final speaker is Kate Kendall, who is a Senior Engagement Manager at the National Lottery Heritage Fund. Kate will offer an overview of the National Lottery Heritage Fund's investment principles and their new strategy called Heritage 2033. So once we've heard from all our speakers, we will then have an opportunity for questions, as I mentioned. Okay, so I think that's enough from me. So I'm pleased to hand over to Kate Bierman. For those who haven't met or worked with Kate before, Kate is responsible for raising funds for Theatres Trust from trusts and foundations, public funders, individuals and corporates, as well as managing our lovely Friends and Corporate scheme. So Kate, over to you.
Thank you, Sian. I'm very, very pleased to be joining you all today. So next slide, please. Okay, so what we thought we would start off with is thinking about making sure that you're in the right position in terms of being a charity. So it's really important for you to start thinking about things like governance right at the beginning. So make sure you've got the right structure as an organisation, make sure you've got the right number of trustees on board, and that trustees really understand their sort of responsibilities as a board member, as well as understanding their sort of role in terms of fundraising. It's always good to think about having an ethical fundraising policy, and make note for trustees of things like the Code of Fundraising Practice linked in with the fundraising regulator. Getting those things right at the beginning is sort of so important. And another thing that can be really helpful for you is look at a skills audit of your board. So really address who's on your board at the moment, but also think about, well, what skills might I need going forward? So it could be, might I need somebody that's more knowledgeable about planning or heritage or education or finance? So really think about who you've got, what you might need going forward, and then get those right people on your board to put you in good stead going forward. It's really important that you've thought about the organisation's vision and the mission statement, and you've got sort of really clear ambitions about what the organisation is about and what you're sort of trying to achieve from the capital project. Other things to think about just in those early stages is to make sure that you've got all the right policies in place. And that's sort of both in terms of you as an organisation, but also some you'll be particularly asked for in terms of fundraising. So think about a safeguarding policy if you're working with young people and vulnerable adults. Think about your equity, diversity and inclusion policy. If you're going to be working with a lot of volunteers, think about having that policy in place, and also how you're going to handle your finances and any gifts that you might be given. Other things you absolutely will be asked for in terms of fundraising is your annual report and accounts. So make sure that's all up to date and on the Charity Commission website. And also make sure you've just got a really clear business plan and your budgets. And that's both for your organisation now, but also for your organisation when you come to any potential capital project. And I think, you know, before you move on to those next steps of fundraising, it's really important just to make sure you've got all of these things in place. And then when it comes to the project, I think the one thing I would really stress is really think about that big project as a whole right at the beginning, and do that sort of really sort of blue sky thinking and get sort of really strategic thoughts in place. So, you know, why is it important for your organisation to be doing this now? How is it going to support the organisation with your long-term aims? And I think it's also important to think about a future beyond the capital project. So will your building be viable long term once you've done the capital project? And again, to go back to those sort of key themes that I addressed earlier, what's your inclusion policy? How are you going to engage with people within the community? What's your environmental sustainability policy? And I think that's important to flag within the build of any capital project, but also long term, how will your building be sort of environmentally efficient going forward? And also another thing that's really important now to think about is your evaluation. How are you going to evaluate the impact that the project is having right at the beginning of the project, so you're able to monitor it as you go on? And I think the other thing that's really important to engage with at the beginning is your stakeholders, and who are those key strategic partners that are going to help you deliver the project. So this could be your MPs and local authority. It could be, what community groups are you going to engage with? Are there any developers that are doing works within the area that you might be able to link up with? And who are those sort of early funders that it's worth really talking to right at the beginning of your project? Or it could link into a university, it could be education providers. Really think about the scale of the stakeholders and key strategic partners that you're going to work with. Because the other thing that will be crucial for you to think about is, who are the project beneficiaries? You're doing this amazing building, but who are you going to be engaging with? Is it for your audiences? Is it your artists who are working within the building? How are you really going to work with community groups, your schools, your colleges? I think it's so important at the start of the project to really think about what the demand is for the project that you're trying to deliver, but also doing consultations with local groups, so you're really confident that you're delivering the right project for the right group. And also, when you're doing sort of big blue sky strategic thinking, don't forget to think about the role that placemaking has within any capital project. So it could be that, of course, it's a vital resource for the community in terms of accessing arts, but also sort of think about it in terms of that bigger picture about what's the social and economic impact. Does it make people want to come to an area? Does it make people want to move into the area? What makes it desirable, and how does that feed into sort of the wider, bigger picture? And as well as sort of those big blue sky strategic thinking, there are some real practicalities that you'll need to think about. So how's the project going to be scheduled? Is there a particular phasing that you're going to take place? What's the budget? You'll need to have your designs from your architect up to a certain stage for a lot of funders. Do you have your planning permissions in place? Have you gone through that process? And also think there might be sort of specific reports that might be needed. So it could be conservation management plans, economic viability studies, audience engagement plans. Really think about what you might need there. And as I've stressed before, the business plan for when the building is complete will be really important too, because you don't want a sort of an extraordinary new building or restored building that you're not able to then progress forward with once it's opened. And as I've sort of done really do some real proper thinking in terms of getting the project to this stage, it's also really important to do your research when it comes to the funding mix. This is sort of headlines of the sorts of fundings that's available for you. So sort of your public funding, there's still some funds available for Capital in Arts Council, National Lottery Heritage Fund, which we're going to hear from, Historic England, National Lottery Community Funds, always tend to have pockets of funding. So it's really worth researching to find out what might be relevant for you. At the moment, there are funds available through the Department of Levelling Up, Housing and Communities. So that's possibly your Levelling Up funding, Community Ownership Fund. And that's when I mentioned talk to your local authority and your MP. Some of them you can apply to directly to, but some of them have to be part of a local authority bid. So it's really important to make those relationships and those sort of key strategic partners right at the beginning. As Dave is going to talk about, trusts and foundations, and that can be from sort of large lead gifts to really kick a campaign off, right down to sort of smaller donations as you get further down your strategy. And the same with individual giving. Some lead sort of philanthropic gifts can really help, but then that takes you right down to your smaller buy a brick, buy a seat campaign, and crowdfunding, which is a great way to sort of engage with your audience and with your local community. The next is always explore if there's any local authority grants or loan finance. Again, everything will need to be researched to see if it's available. And then another option, which we're going to hear about later, is social investment and bank lending. And the last one I'd mention, which doesn't tend to be the sort of the lead supporter in a capital project, but sponsorship. So do you align with any sort of national companies which could get national sponsorship, or is there sort of more local ones that you could engage? It could be sort of local law firms or accountancy firms that might be interested in supporting something local or in kind. This could be in terms of sort of materials, or there are some companies that will offer sort of volunteers and sort of that have specific skills for capital projects. But I think, like with the beginning, take that time to really get the project and do that proper thinking of strategic plans and people in place. But it's the same with the fundraising, make sure you really do take the time and research each area. so you get the right funders for your project.
Thank you, Kate. Thank you. That's really excellent introduction. I think you've given us something to think about there in terms of the groundwork that needs to be done before you proceed with applications, and looking at making sure you're taking that strategic approach to how you approach the applications. I just wanted to ask you, I know, Kate, you've been working in this field for several years, whereas a number of people in our audience might be just starting out. I wondered if you had a top tip which you would be willing to share, or any sort of key point that you wish you'd known when you first began this type of work, which might be of interest to our audience.
Yeah, of course. I mean, I think I'm going to share an approach, really, in the sense that it can be really, it's a journey you're going on with any sort of fundraising, particularly a capital project. And I think it's about trying to remain positive and upbeat throughout the process, but be prepared that you may get some rejections, more than likely get rejections along the way, and just try and think sort of practically and strategically about what the next move might be. I'll put it in a tiny sort of example, is that I did do a capital project for one of these theatres at risk, and we had our sort of plans about how we felt the project was going to go, and then our first application to the National Lottery Heritage Fund was sadly rejected, and of course that was like, oh gosh, what are we going to do now? But what it meant is that we re-looked at the project, we phased it in 2 approaches, and was able to do one of the phases with some money that was already raised and some additional funds that was given to it. And then we went back for the second phase, which went back to the lottery, and who brilliantly did fund it. And then there was other sort of trusts and foundations and individuals came on board. And it worked that way. And it's a brilliant thing to think with hindsight, is actually, I think that was the right approach for the project, because the building hadn't been opened that long as an art centre. And I don't think it would have had the audience and sort of the capacity to be closed for as long as it would have been with the initial plans. Obviously, I would say that because that's how it turned out. But I think that's the approach, to try and be as positive and upbeat, but also being sort of willing to change. And also, when you see the building open full of people, full of young people, you will be inspired and so pleased that you stuck with it. So I think that's my upbeat, and remain confident it will happen.
That's great, Kate. Lovely to finish with that positivity. It's good to persevere and learn from the experience.
Exactly.
Thanks very much, Kate. So I'd now like to welcome our next speaker, Asha Kabari. Asha is the Director of Investment at the Architectural Heritage Fund and manages the team that deliver the Architectural Heritage Fund's social investment funds to a broad range of not-for-profit organisations across the UK. Asha also manages the Replan scheme, which is the Architectural Heritage Fund's business support service. So I'd like to welcome Asha to deliver a talk. I can't see her at the moment. I'm wondering if you can.
I'm here.
Excellent. That's great. Asha, over to you. Thank you.
Brilliant. So yeah, many thanks, Theatres Trust, for letting me join the webinar and present, particularly on loan funds and demystifying loan funds, because I know loan finance can be usually the last tool in the fundraising mix that organisations kind of access or sometimes not even consider. So it was really helpful to see Kate's breakdown of kind of the funding mix and see social investment kind of at the bottom end, which is usually right and in most cases, but sometimes it can be a powerful tool within the funding mix as well. So yes, I'm really pleased to be able to talk about that in particular today, but to talk about the Architectural Heritage Fund, and hopefully a lot of the audience will already know a lot about the Architectural Heritage Fund, and possibly even more than I do as well. So it was established nearly 50 years ago, and solely to provide loan finance as well to the heritage sector to help building preservation trusts to conserve, restore historic buildings and put them back into the public domain. So we have grown and developed since 1976, and we have brought in grant funding as well and provide kind of advice service as well throughout the UK. So we have grown as an organisation, but loan finance is still quite very much the heart of what the AHF does. We provide support to a wide range of organisations, from kind of startup organisations to very, established and developed trusts as well. And we do have a good network of staff throughout the UK that provide good service and advice to community organisations. So we're always open to talking to organisations to see which of our funding packages are right for you and at what stage they would be right to come to the AHF for. Next slide, please. So really, in terms of where I sit within the AHF, and as Sean kind of explained, it's within the social investment sector. So social investment might be a new phrase for a lot of organisations, and what does social investment really mean? And technically, it is kind of debt finance within the social environment, social sector. So for charitable organisations. So it's not the traditional loan finance you would access through your mainstream banks. And there are two types really. There's loan finance, which we class as debt finance, but we also consider community shares as social investment as well. And they're shares which individuals can buy shares within the organisation, and they take an equity within your organisation. And those shares can be called up at any time by those individuals. So that's why they do fall into kind of the social investment area. So they're slightly different to kind of crowdfunding, because individuals kind of fundraise and help you fundraise. But whereas community shares, they are classed as shares, and those individuals can call upon those shares or withdraw those shares. It is repayable finance, so it's to help you organisations to achieve your mission and purpose. And it's particularly aimed at charities and social enterprises that have the ability to pay the loan finance through various means. The only difference between social investment and, I guess, grant funding, or the key thing, is it has to be repaid, and it usually comes with interest and fees as well. Next slide. So if we talk about the funds that the AHF has and the loan funds, we have two main funds, which is the Heritage Impact Fund, which is a newer fund to the Architectural Heritage Fund, and it was launched in 2019. And this is a specific fund to help organisations not only deliver heritage impact, but also social impact. So organisations are very good at restoring buildings, bringing them back into use. But the Heritage Impact Fund looks at a level deeper as well, to look at the kind of social impact you're actually delivering through these projects, and even at the capital stage of delivering those projects as well. So whether you're providing training opportunities, volunteering opportunities to the local community before the building is even in use. Then we have our traditional endowment fund, which is for organisations that are looking just to help restore, renovate the building and bring it back into use. And it's whether they've not considered any additional impact within that project. So we have the two key funds. You can apply from as little as £20,000 up to £500,000, and we have done loans over £500,000 on exceptional circumstances. And the use of the loan can be for a variety of reasons, but these are kind of some of the key ones. The ones for capital projects usually tend to be for cash flow or working capital. So if you have, been successful with grant funding or raising funds, there might be a time delay in terms of receiving payments of those grants. So if your trust doesn't have the upfront cash to pay your invoices or pay for some of the works, that's where loan finance is a really key tool to have in your fundraising box. So you have the funds available to pay those invoices to then reclaim through grant funding or do other fundraising activities. So you can, some organisations will have done the fundraising, 90%, of the fundraising of the total project, but you have that gap. Again, social investment could be used to fill that gap. And again, we would work with the organisation to make sure that, loan finance is right to bridge that funding gap. Which brings me on to a good case study, really, with the Electric Palace cinema down in Essex. So they were a fully funded project which had funding from the NLHF and Historic England. and it was under £1 million project, so not a huge scale project as some organisations would be delivering. But as the works were being undertaken, they identified a need and a funding gap. Asbestos was discovered. So from just under £1 million project, it rose the cost of the project by £500,000. So we can see where projects might think they've got the full funds, and then it turns out they do need additional funds. So thankfully, Historic England and LHF were able to plug most of that £500,000, but they still had a shortfall. And because it was an enterprise that was going to deliver, activities, generate revenue, they saw loan finance as a viable option to build, to bridge that gap. So they came to us for a loan of £70,000. Our average loan size is around 250, 300,000. So this is considered quite, a low amount for us to do. And they were able to do the repayments through their trading activities once the building was up and running. So this is quite a good example of where you may not have considered loan finance at the beginning of your funding mix, but then it came into the mix once your project was underway. So it's always good to keep an open mind with this. So given that I've kind of gone through what social investment is and some of our funds, there's still the question of why borrow, and this is a key one for the sector really, and one of it is because there is reduced availability of what I class as free money. And free money is, it can be grant funding, donations, fundraising, and we're seeing that more and more in the current economic climate. There has been a reduction of organisations being able to fundraise, through the usual means. So that is one of the key reasons why you might consider going to social investment. Also, the speed at which social investment usually has a turnaround of applications. So with the AHF, we have quarterly meetings, but we do take applications outside of those quarterly meetings as and when an applicant needs their funds. Also, I know some grant funders, you could be in the process for 6 to 12 months before you know an outcome. So again, it is it's to consider that it's generally non-competitive, and you have flexibility on how you spend the loan finance. Obviously not to go on holiday, but on the project itself. So you have that flexibility to spend with little coming back to the investor to say, we need a variation. And also you get the loan finance up front, so there's no payment in arrears, and you have that cash in your bank, which is always helpful. And one of the good things is that loan finance usually encourages business planning stage as well, and thinking about the long-term sustainability of your enterprise rather than the short-term thinking of how we're going to get from X to Y. So it's kind of broadening that initial business planning, which Kate mentioned in her presentation as well. So you might still be thinking, is loan funding the right choice for you? And I would say, it might not be the right decision for every organisation, but it's something to consider. We do have an organisation called Good Finance, which a link will be shared later on. But if you go on their website, there is an actual tool that you work through and a questionnaire to see if loan finance is right for your organisation. But Kate did a really good slide on this, so I won't repeat all this again, but it is very much at looking at, do you have the right organisational structure? So this is probably the one that needs a bit more clarification in terms of not all organisations have the power to borrow, and this is something that you would need to look in your memorandum articles or your governing documents to see if you have got that specific power. Some organisations have specific clauses in there to say you're not allowed to borrow money, or you're not allowed to provide security to your building to an investor or a funder. So these are the additional things you might want to consider. But yeah, all the other points, you would need to go through and see if loan finance is the right choice for you. The one that usually everybody wants to know is what are the loan terms, and I've kind of put a snapshot of what the AHF loan terms are. So that's on the next slide, please. And yeah, interest rates are usually the eye-watering side of things, but given the current economic climate, we're still we haven't raised our interest rates as obviously mainstream banks and other investors may have done. So we're still very much competitive in the marketplace, and we're probably at a stage where we're actually competitive with mainstream finance providers as well. So between 8 and 10%, and that is and it will depend varying on the risk of your project and what security you are able to provide when you do apply to us. There's other costs to consider, which are fees, which I mentioned earlier, and they can be between 1 to 2%. Legal fees, so if an investor is taking security, the legal fees are usually borne by the organisation that's looking to borrow funds, and the loan duration can be anything from 6 months up to 20 years. The flexibility between probably mainstream finance and social investment is that we're more flexible when it comes to repayment holidays, so we can take that into consideration. So when we, especially for capital projects, we don't expect you to start repaying, straight away. We know there's going to be a time lag when you do the works, get the building up and running, and then be able to make the repayments. But also, we're also very good, social investors are very good at rescheduling your loan. So if things don't quite go to plan, rather than kind of coming down heavy on organisations to say, no, we want our funds back, we will work with you to see what's the best and appropriate way to move forward. And we did kind of mention that we do have some support to provide organisations both before you apply and after you've received the funds as well. So the next slide, please. This is our kind of capacity building programme. So we have the REACH fund, which we are an access point of, which is a grant fund of up to £15,000, and it's a referral process. So if you are considering social investment as part of your fundraising mix, but you need more help or support with kind of the financial reporting or business planning and modelling, market research, so doing a bit more delving into kind of the need and demand of the service that you're looking to provide, and even governance support, there's a grant fund available of up to £15,000 to help you either backfill your post while you do some of this work, or appoint a consultant or a professional of your choice to help you with that work. If you have received funds from the AHF or you're an NLHF fund grantee, because Replan is co-funded by the NLHF, you can have access again to some capacity building work. So if you've got the building up and running and you need some more support, then we can provide, again, it's a free service, which we can help you appoint consultants, whether you need, the business plan needs to be revised or your financial model needs to be revised. We can provide you with extra support with that as well. So to finish off with, I wanted to kind of touch on another case study of ours, which is the South London Theatre. They came to us for an endowment loan of £100,000. Again, it was to build, to bridge a funding gap. So where, as many of you might be aware of, you'll apply to a range of organisations for grant funding with the hope of, being able to secure most or majority of that. With the Theatres Trust, they weren't, and they had an unexpected kind of shortfall. So they came to the AHF to bridge that gap. So again, they were successful, and they've been making repayments through their trading activity. And I think next month they will be repaying the full, the remainder of their loan investment. So they'll be debt free from the AHF at least. And they've received other grants and support from the AHF since they've had the initial investment as well. So it is something to consider as part of your fundraising mix, whether you think of it right from the early on in the planning stage, or whether it's something you revisit once your project is underway. Thank you.
Thank you, Asha. That's a really informative presentation. I appreciated the level of detail there, because potentially, like many on the call, this is an area which I'm unfamiliar with compared to my knowledge of grants. So I do appreciate that. I was going to ask you a question about what happens if things go wrong. But whilst you've been talking, a couple of little questions have come in from our audience. So perhaps we could just quickly address those now, because they're about eligibility, really. So firstly, in terms of repayment schedule, you kindly explained that there is flexibility there, and in almost terms could be agreed on an individual basis depending on the circumstances. Would that be fair to say that?
Yeah, so we schedule the repayments according to your cash flow forecast to see, you know, where the organisation will be able to commence repayments, and how, you know, and how we can work with that. So yeah, it's every I guess loan applicant is tailored. We tailor each repayment schedule. Perfect.
And could you clarify, are the loans only available to heritage buildings?
Sadly, for the Architectural Heritage Fund, there needs to be a heritage building within the project. But however, the social investment can be for anything. So when I mentioned the Good Finance website, it lists over 50 social investors which invest in a broad range of organisations that are not just heritage buildings.
That's great, Asha. So a few more questions are coming in, which is excellent, that people are interested in your availability of funds. But if you don't mind, we're just going to move on to our next speaker, and then we'll collect the questions afterwards, and just to make sure we have enough time to review everything. So thank you very much, Asha. That's great. So I'm now going to invite our next speaker, David, to present. So David is the Chief Executive of the Foyle Foundation. The Foyle Foundation is an independent grant-making trust that distributes grants to UK charities and is a significant supporter of arts organisations. We're delighted that David is here to tell us more about the Foundation's work, the priorities and funding opportunities. So thank you, David, if you'd like to begin.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. The Foyle Foundation is a grant maker. That's what we do. We don't offer loans or anything else. We make grants. At the moment, we're spending about £11 million a year on our grant making, and that's gone up every year for the last 5 or 6 years, and will continue to do so. You need to be a registered charity to apply to the Foyle Foundation. That's something I need to make clear right from the very beginning. We have a restriction on the way we were set up, and particularly the terms of the will which endowed us, that actually we have to support charities. That's something you have to be a registered charity to apply to us, which isn't always the case with other trusts and foundations, depending on their flexibility, but we do not have that ability. Now, we have a small grants program and a main grants program. I'm not really going to talk about the small grants. All this information is on the website. I'm going to concentrate on our main grants program, which supports both revenue and capital projects. And that's where most theatres and performing arts organisations would apply to. And on the main grant, it's split between two areas, arts and learning. And again, I'll focus on the arts particularly today. We've had a number of changes reflecting the impact of the pandemic on organisations and what we needed to do to be more flexible and more helpful after COVID and post-COVID and the new normal that we're entering into. So one of our aims is to be as flexible as possible wherever we can be. And that's something that sort of is very strong at the heart of what we're trying to do, particularly in the next couple of years. As a consequence of that, though, we are only making one-year grants at the moment. This enables us to fund many more organisations than we normally would do. And secondly, it's partly because of the concern that trustees have that in this early post-COVID period, there's a lot of financial instability still around, and everyone to monitor the progress of organisations as they move forward out of the post-COVID period. So it's one-year grants only at the moment. There's a slight deviation on that on capital, which I'll come on to shortly. So what do we look for in a good project coming to us, a good case of support? It obviously has to be a strong case of support. You know, why you want to do this, what you want to achieve has to come through very clearly indeed. It's not about ticking the boxes and answering the questions in a simplistic way on the form. It's about really expressing why you need to do this, why you need this funding, what it's going to help you to do. That has to come across very, very clearly indeed. We're also looking as part of that for a very clear artistic mission coming through as well, and how this project will enhance that. Financial stability I've mentioned, we're looking at that very carefully. Some organizations have emerged in a very precarious position, particularly building-based ones post-COVID. Others actually have done better than expected with COVID recovery funds and are in a slightly healthier position. It's not one size fits all, but nevertheless, it's an unusual situation, so we're monitoring it very, very closely. It doesn't mean you won't get funded if you've had a difficult financial period over the last couple of years. It just means we'll be looking very clearly, what's your recovery strategy to move forward from this? How are you going to get back to where you want to be if you're still having financial difficulties? So it's about having that recovery plan is important. So really we're looking for practical projects that advance your work, advance your mission, and help you sort of carry out your work. That's what we're looking to fund. Looking at what we could fund, I'll just mention very briefly revenue, because as I said at the beginning, we are a capital and a revenue funder. And then I'm going to home in on the capital side more specifically. But we're trying to be flexible, or more flexible than previously we might have been as a project funder, because remember, most trusts and foundations are project funders, whether that be capital only, revenue only, or a combination. One of the ways in which we are trying to be flexible is offering core funding more than we would have done to organizations that are not NPOs or have lost their NPO status and are in a transition period, or in fact don't receive any local authority or any other regular public support. So we're now saying we will offer them some core funding if that is the best way for them to progress going forward. We'll also fund education work, audience development work, new commissions. We do quite a lot of funding of touring work and encouraging joint partnerships on touring or productions, things like that. We also very keen on investing in projects to help you reduce your cost base or help you generate more income. And in particular, a new focus over the last 2.5 years on how you green or become a more environmentally sustainable building by reducing your energy costs, reducing your carbon footprint, issues like this, as a longer term strategy, how you move forward on that from a slow start, but progress slowly through. You can't do everything in one go, but obviously we want to encourage people to start on that journey and sort of look at the obvious things to do to become a more sustainable and a greener building. So that's quite important for us too, this increased focus on environmental sustainability. We actually don't fund very much education work, by the way, which may sound strange to many of you. That's partly because so many other trust foundations will do that we tend to focus on the other areas, particularly new commissions, new work, issues like this, where sort of fewer foundations might support that work, or in fact in touring as well, where we do quite a lot of investment in touring. But moving on to the capital side, there are not too many trusts and foundations fund capital, but we are one of them. And we do that because of the long-term benefits to the organization of embarking on a capital strategy. That's actually what it should do. It should have a long-term benefit to you. And particularly what we look for is obviously what are you trying to do and why, and how does a capital project help you deliver your work more effectively or enhance your artistic mission? You have to be very clear about that. What's the obstacle you're trying to overcome? What's the problem with your building or your art center, whatever it might be, that's holding you back? That has to be very clear in your case of support, coming forward. So we're looking for that very clearly. And then how, if you remove that obstacle through some sort of improvement to the building or addition to the building or renovation of the building, or actually changing the way you use some of the spaces in the building, how does that, as I say, encourage you to develop your work, move your work forward, and help promote your artistic mission? So we're very clearly looking for that. So what are you trying to overcome, and what will you achieve by this capital project? I've mentioned the new focus, particularly with buildings, where you're a building-based organization, on the environmental side, but it's all about, at the moment for us on the capital side, how do we sustain existing buildings? How do we help you to modernize your infrastructure? So we're focusing on that, on existing buildings rather than new buildings. In actual fact, I think given where we still are a couple of years after or a year after COVID, people really shouldn't be embarking on new major building projects unless they really have got their security of their financial viability behind them and they're back to where they want to be with their audiences and they feel more secure. So it's more about, for us at this moment in time, how to make existing buildings work better, improve them, modernize them, help the organization move forward after the last really troubled last few years. And also because there's a build-up, a backlog of major works to be done in many buildings, not just theatres, not just art centres, but across the whole arts world, because everybody slashed their budgets or had their budget just massacred because of the financial crisis caused by COVID. So no maintenance was done, no equipment renewal was done, etc. Unless it's absolutely necessary. So there's a big backlog of things that are emerging that are preventing people from moving forward as we try to get back to a new normality of operating your buildings year round. So that's the big focus for us on that. Now, it isn't just about funding the building. We will fund equipment. So it can be essential equipment, lighting, sound, other infrastructure, other boilers, all kinds of things, not just sort of physical works to the building, as it were. So that's a key part of it too. And that can be quite important for touring organizations, touring theatre companies, which are not building based. They can access us for capital to actually sort of look at how they can improve the way they work and operate through additional equipment or more modern equipment to help them deliver what they're doing on their artistic side. So that's a focus too. The other thing we want to look at as well, and increasingly looking at, is sort of when you're looking at capital projects to your building, is improving the flexibility of the building, but also can we in a way help you or invest in you to improve your income generation or in some way reduce your cost base. Now, it isn't just through reducing your energy costs, so that's an increasingly important part, and certainly the last year has emphasized that with the explosion in energy costs. But there are particular areas where we want to invest in, and as I say, part of that moving forward onto the environmental sustainability agenda, that actually make the building longer term, more sustainable, more secure, with a smaller carbon footprint and a lower energy base that you have to sort of fund. So they're pretty important for us. The other thing I would say about how to be more successful in an application, and by the way, usually 1 in 4 applications win through on the main grant scheme. It was 1 in 3, it's gone to 1 in 4 because there's more organizations applying, although we are giving more grants this year than we normally would because of our 1-year focus. But it's about a 1 in 4 chance, so bear that in mind. So what we're looking for really is, you need to apply for what you need to do, not what you think you get funding for. Sometimes people or organizations pigeonhole trust and think, oh, they'll fund this, they'll fund that, but they probably wouldn't fund that. Well, you don't know unless you've asked us. So ask us, this is the real thing that's holding you back. Can we apply for funding for that? And we'll tell you. So that's the thing to do. People make mistakes by applying to trust what they think they'll get funding for as opposed to what they really need to do. So that is something that you need to avoid. What more can I say? As far as timescale is concerned, if it's applying for capital equipment for renewal purposes, you should allow up to 4 months in an application process to us. Actually, most organizations will hear within 2 to 3 months, but we say 4 to be on the safe side. If you're a major capital project, and I'm talking about multi-million pound sort of modernization projects, things like that, then we're only looking at them twice a year. So we can look at them in depth and choose the ones that we can support very clearly by comparing them to others and looking what the benefits are. And so you need to allow a sort of a longer time span to hear back from us. I mean, the guidelines on the website are very clear about this, but I'm just sort of explaining the difference. But for equipment, it would be a much, much faster sort of turnaround because that will go into all of the board meetings, not just the 2 special ones reserved for capital projects. I'm probably going to stop there because I'm sure there'll be lots of questions, but I think sort of that covers what I wanted to say, the key features for the moment, Sian.
That's great, David. Thank you very much. That's really insightful, actually, to gain an understanding.
Can I make one more point? I have missed one more point. The other thing I think you need to be very careful of as well is one of the weaknesses we find is that people can very often articulate what they want to do on their capital project. They do not say enough about how they're going to finance the ongoing cost that there might be. If you have an expansion of your building, if you're building a new studio theatre or add an annex on or something else, you're going to have an increased cost base. And very often that isn't addressed satisfactorily in the capital project. So that's something to be aware of too. We're very conscious about that. We don't want to over-encourage people to expand if it's not sustainable. So one last thing that I missed out from my presentation.
So that's great, David. Thank you. I think you've really drawn attention to the priorities that you use when you're assessing applications and some of the pitfalls. We are getting quite a few questions through for you,
Right.
where people are looking at specifics of how to approach an application to the Foyle Foundation.
Yeah.
I think bearing in mind we still have one speaker to go, I'm going to park those questions and we'll do our best to address them at the end. And I'm just mindful that we may not be able to address everyone's questions individually as part of the end of the session. But if there are any points that we don't address, I'm happy to collate them from the chat function and then see if we could put together some kind of written points afterwards, just to make sure people feel like they're getting the most from the session. So I'm happy to take that task on to assist.
Okay.
So thank you very much, David. So I'm now finally going to move on to our final speaker, Kate Kendall. Kate is a senior engagement manager at the Heritage Fund, and she's going to talk to us about their work and introduce their new strategy, Heritage 2033. So over to you, Kate.
Thanks, Sian. Yes, nice to meet you all. Virtually, I'm sure we'll get a chance in real life at some point or other. Yes, as Sian said, I'm Kate Kendall. I'm from the Heritage Fund. Please just feel free to call us the Heritage Fund. It is an awful mouthful saying the National Lottery Heritage Fund. So yes, you have permission and you've heard it from me to say that. Can I have the next slide, please? Yeah, I'm going to give you a quick overview. It's going to be a bit of a whistle-stop tour of who we are, what we do, our all-important new strategy, the associated investment principles. I'm going to talk a bit about our current process with the medium and large projects, a couple of case studies, and then what to do next. So the next slide, who are we? We are the largest funder of heritage in the UK. So if you buy a lottery ticket, and thank you very much if you do, there's a chunk of that money that goes to the prize fund. And then it goes to, I think, 13 good causes, of which we award 20% of that. So it's quite a significant amount. So yes, lots of our funding decisions are made locally. So we have a monthly delegated decision panel for our medium grants of up to £250,000, and our large grants of 250 and now up to £10 million are determined by our quarterly committees. So I'll come on to a bit more about that later in terms of sort of some of the difference. And next slide. And yes, a bit more about who we are and what we do. So yeah, since '94, can you believe it? It is nearly 30 years ago. I remember just being old enough to buy a lottery ticket when I was 16. We've invested £8.2 billion, which is just phenomenal. And because I'm based in the north, when we did some stats on this, we've actually awarded £2 billion over 12,000 projects within the north, which is just, it's quite amazing. It's all encompassing heritage. We cover the whole of the UK, so from the Isles of Scilly in the south, the Welsh coastline, Northern Ireland to the very far tips of Scotland. And it's not just buildings, which I know is very pertinent here, given we're talking for the Theatres Trust and you've all come from theatres and arts organisations. And I'm very much from a sort of built heritage background, but it's everything. It's natural heritage, bees, grass, coastlines, but landmarks. And we work in partnership with a range of people to make sure that we're getting the money to the right projects in the right places that impact people, and essentially getting the money back to the National Lottery players who make this possible. Can I have the next slide? Yeah, so what do we do? And yeah, there's some stats here, and I'll let you read those at your leisure, and a couple of images at the bottom. So I understand when you will be sharing the slides after this, and you can click on some of the links at the bottom and see the range of different projects that we support. It really is all encompassing, the vast range of things. So if you have an idea, come to us. I know it might be very much focused around potentially your buildings and your organisations, but there might be another type of heritage project that you've not thought about, that kind of the heritage of your place will facilitate that. So just have a think about it. So, and on to the next slide. I did say this was going to be a whistle-stop tour. We're going to talk to you very briefly about Heritage 2033, and it sets our approach for the future and in the next 10 years, which seems ambitious, but it's important to have that kind of long-term view and think about what we want to do. But in terms of how we're going to do that, we're actually launching 3-year delivery plans. The strategy, it's going to set out what we want to do. It's a vision for the future. And it kind of reflects on the consultation that we did last year. I think there was approximately 4,000 responses that we had. And our colleagues in sort of one section of the organisation kind of took that away and kind of pulled it all together, and we listened and we looked at what people had said and we thought about it. So there's a bit of a change, and it's not to say that that change in terms of what we've been doing and how we go forward, it's a complete, 180. It's far from. It's kind of a refinement of what we're doing and reflecting on some of the challenging times that we've had in recent years. We've all talked about the pandemic. It's there and it's had its impacts. So yes, what we want to do is we will be launching 3-year delivery plans, and we've just had the sneak preview, which is under embargo at the moment, but it will be coming to you at the end of this month, which will set out the detail of how we're going to take the next 3 years forward. What it's going to do, those 3-year delivery plans will have kind of our overarching strategy, but it's going to enable us to be fleet of foot and able to respond to lots of different things. As I say, the pandemic, and we've kind of moved into very challenging financial landscape. It enables us to reflect on that. So if we come to the end of our first 3 years and seeing where we're at, the political landscape could be quite different. We don't know what the finance is going to be like. It's going to be quite, we just don't know. None of us have that proverbial crystal ball, do we? So yes, it's really important that we do that. So on to the next slide, please. Why are we launching a strategy now? Well, it's important actually that we kind of ask ourselves, we set out where we're asking this question, and we always ask this question in every application that you put to us as to why now? So for us, why now? Yes, it responds to the pandemic, and it's about us kind of looking at a range of societal changes and very much around climate crisis and, as I say, the challenging financial landscapes that we find ourselves in. So yes, it's going to hopefully help us to help you and do things in a really good and exciting way, and make sure that we're getting funds to projects that are going to make a real difference to people. Can I have the next slide? So we have our investment principles. This is very much part and parcel of our Heritage 2033. And when we come to sort of change how you apply for things, this is the thing that you need to keep in mind. So we've got the kind of heritage, the investment circle or wheel, or however you want to term it. And we've got these 4 headings, which are about saving heritage, protecting the environment, organisational sustainability, inclusion, access and participation. And as you can see, it's got 4 ambitions beneath each of those headings. And what we're going to be looking at going forward is that your projects will address all of these principles, but I understand might well be weighted more strongly in certain areas, depending on the type of project that you have. Now, if any of you are familiar with our current funding, strategic funding framework, where we have our 9 outcomes, if you were to sit the 2 side by side, it's not, as I say, it's not a complete change. It's not a sea change. You can see how those 9 outcomes have been refined into the 4 investment principles. So, here you say the inclusion, access and participation very much have parallels to be drawn with our mandatory outcome, which we currently work to, about having that wider range of people engaged in heritage. But sort of thinking about some of the other investment principles and those ambitions. So saving heritage, and this is probably kind of quite pertinent to the likes of yourselves in attendance, thinking about reducing the amount of heritage at risk, but kind of thinking outside of that kind of heritage building box, which I have found myself in for a number of years because that's my background. It's not just about necessarily those assets on the Historic England Heritage at Risk Register, which is brilliant. I'm an ex-HE employee and spent 9 years of my career there doing heritage at risk, but it's that heritage at risk beyond kind of the more tangible as well. So think about those stories and perhaps, you know, people who remember place. So yeah, it's a range of different things. Protecting the environment in terms of kind of climate change. This is kind of much more focused around nature conservation and natural heritage, but also, you know, the ability to, you know, adapt to climate change. Talked about inclusion, access and participation, echoing very much our mandatory outcome, but also things around organisational sustainability. So that kind of chimes a bit with what Kate was saying at the start in terms of looking at your governance, how we as an organisation, if you come to us for funding, it's not just necessarily about kind of fixing that place that you have, but you as an organisation actually being much stronger and much more resilient going forward, which then also contributes to having a sustainable business going forward, which David was talking about, not just sorting out your place, but actually making sure that you're there. You as an organisation are as equally important as that building, because without you, how can you take that building forward? So yes, I hope that kind of gives you an idea of what we're looking forward to, and definitely having that in mind if you're thinking about projects. You might not be ready to talk to us now, but this is what's going to be coming up, the delivery plan at the end of the month, and how we take that forward when we make this transition from our current funding framework to the Heritage 2033. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. And part and parcel of the Heritage 2033 is we've got some strategic initiatives, and Kate and our other speaker from the Architectural Heritage Fund, and I'm so sorry, I've completely forgotten your name because I've like gone on the hoof now. Where are you? Asha. Yes, Asha had talked about place and kind of, you know, what makes place important. So we're very much having a focus on place, including urban green space, and then also landscape scale, so kind of big spaces as such, and that kind of very much chimes with our protecting the environment. We've got some strategic initiatives under development, this heritage in need, and that so far is looking like it's going to be industrial heritage and also places of worship. And we also want to ensure that we can potentially support acquisitions, opportunities, and in particular emergencies, which has kind of come out the back of the pandemic, and how we supported quite a significant amount of distribution of the cultural recovery funds. You just don't know what's going to come around the corner, as we all found out a few years ago. So could I have the next one? Thank you. So our approach we've had in the last few years through the funding framework has been the open programme. So those of us that knew us previously, we had a whole range of different, I suppose, different funding doors that you could go through. And we kind of refined that to have the open programme, which is essentially kind of small, medium and large grants. And we're going to continue with that open programme. So you could have your idea, but come to us and it's set within a certain financial threshold. We're going to continue within this first 3-year delivery plan of our delegated decisions. So all of the grants, the applications that you make to us for up to £250,000 will be decided monthly. And our upper grant, our larger grants, the actual thresholds increased to £10 million. Those awards are made quarterly through our committee meetings, and all those committee members are recruited through an open recruitment process. So it could be something in future that you might be interested in being part and parcel of. So keep an eye on that as and when you know, committee members leave. And that 10 million, so we've gone from 250,000 to 5 million was our original large grants bracket, but we've increased that up to 10 million. That might come as some interest, but there is a bit of a change in the sense that anything up to 5 million will be decided locally, but anything 5 million above will be taken to to our board, there's only a certain amount of money to go around. So some of those projects have got to be absolutely exceptional. And it's not to say that any of your projects won't be special, but the more you're asking for, there's a lot of, you're going to have to, you know, essentially say why it's super important. And yeah, I was kind of thinking back to what Kate was saying earlier, sort of setting out about what we look for in projects. We want to know why you want to do it. Is there a need there that you've identified? Is there that demand? Have you spoken to stakeholders? Where does it fit? Have you done consultation? All sorts of things to consider. Can I have the next slide? Yes, so our medium and large grants within the open programme. Our large grants, you need to submit an expression of interest. And if you are successful, that you will then be invited to apply. We keep a very close eye on that pipeline, and you only have a 12-month window in which to apply. So you've got to come to us at the right time. You know, does it kind of fit within your longer term goals? It's all about the timing, as are many things in life. It's a 2-stage application process. So you kind of need to sort of break it down in terms of what are you going to do within that development phase, and kind of figure out, you know, that a project emerges, how you're going to test and pilot things. And then when you get into your delivery phase, particularly if you're doing large capital programs, that's the point at which that you're actually going to be kind of getting the scaffold up, getting the shovels in the ground. So it's bearing in mind the fact that these 2-stage processes are a long period of time, and you might not be getting to those repairs until a bit further down the line. The importance to bear that in mind. In terms of the funding, we ask for 5% match up to £1 million. Over £1 million, it's 10%. And that can be a combination of cash, non-cash, and volunteer time. Our medium grants of £10,000 to £250,000, it's a much quicker process. It's an 8-week decision period. Once you've been through your application checks, you will get a decision within that 8-week period. Single stage process. What we, or I would certainly recommend, is if you've got an idea for a project, is to submit a project inquiry form. And that kind of starts the conversation with the engagement team, who can give you guidance and advice and signpost. It might be that we know of groups or other organizations in the area that we think might be worth you having a conversation. You know, we can, it's not quite matchmaking, but we can certainly point people in the right direction. These medium-sized grants tend to be a project of up to 5 years, and it's a 5% match over £100,000. And thinking about the HF loan finance, anything over £100,000 we pay in arrears. So, you know, it could be that you do need to speak to our friends at the AHF to see how you kind of work all the numbers and the finance together. And I have the next slide. Oh, a couple of case studies. So I'm going to whiz through these, and I will caveat, they're all from the north, but I am based in the north, so that's why. I'm going to start over in the northeast. So this is Darlington Civic Theatre, an Edwardian variety theatre, and it's owned by the local authority. They not only undertook a significant amount of capital works, as you can see here, there was also a really comprehensive activity programme, and that's the bit we're interested in. It's about getting people involved and how all those capital repairs can facilitate that people engagement. So that was awarded 4.9 million nearly 10 years ago. And within the vicinity, we have this beautiful Grade 2 Art Deco globe of Stockton. Closed its doors in '97, as I'm sure is a case for lots of theatres that you are probably familiar with. This was a Heritage Enterprise scheme that was submitted 10 years ago to the tune of 3.9 that was successfully awarded. Now, Heritage Enterprise is something we've been doing for a while, and it's that mixture of kind of private support, private investment alongside heritage fund support as well. So it's something we've got lots of guidance on our website, and I will kind of say from here, I'm not an expert in this. So if you have got any questions, I'll answer them best that I can. But if not, I certainly know the colleagues of who to ask those questions of and can get back to you. As we move into Yorkshire, which I know for some people this is the God's country, as I'm frequently told by my Yorkshire-born husband, and I thought it was important to include this because it's the capital of culture in Bradford in 2025. Now, as you can see here, it's not a huge grant that we've awarded. It's very much focused around activity and getting people involved and how they engage with heritage rather than actually kind of doing capital repairs. And the next and last one, the Plaza in Stockport, which is very close to home for me. It's an absolutely stunning Grade 2 star listed picture house. And it's, as you can see, we funded this in the relatively-ish early days of the fund back in 2007. So it was kind of predominantly very much capital repairs to the tune of £2 million. And it is absolutely amazing. And I took my dad there for a Laurel and Hardy film marathon a few years ago, and it was absolutely brilliant. Each of those images has got a link to, so you can have an explore of a bit more information of those at your leisure when you receive the slides. And on to my final slide. So what are the next steps? What can I recommend you to do? Definitely sign up to our email updates. I know that everyone's inboxes get hammered, but please do, because it will give you the latest information, and particularly the all-important link to when the delivery plan comes out at the end of the month. And plus there's the overarching strategy that's also available on our website now. I mentioned our project inquiry service. If you've got an idea or you've got a project that you kind of want to come to us and talk to, get that form in, and then we can have the conversation, and it will get distributed either in the north between the northern team or any of the other engagement teams across the country. Another thing that I recommend is book onto one of our webinars. They're really helpful. They're 2 hours online, lots of breaks, don't worry, plenty of time for lose and bruise, but help to demystify the application process and kind of give you some really good guidance about the things that you need to do as part of the application. And last but not least is taking a look at our good practice guidance that covers a vast range of things. So things around activity plans, digital guidance, all important environmental sustainability, which is what all of us of the speakers have talked about today. And it's quite key in those capital projects, but also it can feature even in the small ways that you might not expect in terms of some activity programs. So think about, you know, reusable cups and not single-use practice. It might only be small, but it's all those tiny little differences that can make the big difference. There's a range of things around oral history, skills training, well-being, lots and lots of stuff there for you to digest at your leisure. So thank you for listening. I know that's been a very, very, very quick canter through the Heritage Fund. And if you've got questions, I can take them alongside others as we go on. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kate. Always tricky to have the final slot because of the timings, but we appreciate that. Really informative and lovely to see the case studies which make it come alive. Good to see some success stories. So at this point, we have heard from all our speakers, and I would like to take the opportunity to say a big thank you to them all for giving up their time and sharing their expertise and creating a really informative session.